thank you very much, and thanks for sticking around to the very end here. It's always fun batting cleanup, especially when you have to follow some pretty heavy hitters and great presentations. What I want to do for the next 10 minutes is now kind of go from much of what you've heard in horizontal assets and infrastructure to the vertical elements, which are buildings and facilities. Well, I'm a civil engineer, and I really relate more to the infrastructure side. I've been dealing in the built environment in the buildings for quite a while. So what I want to do, first of all, is asset management in ISO 55000 is broad. It's a very broad management system standard across disciplines. I'm going to narrow the focus into buildings. And when we talk about buildings, often we're dealing in organizations that operate, maintain, manage buildings, which is often facilities management. Forward-thinking organizations are actually moving to facilities and asset management or facility asset management, but this can be property managers, facility managers, et cetera. The real difference being, and for those of you thinking, well, what's the difference here? It's all asset management. Well, it is asset management. I think one of the differences, when you think about facilities management, often individuals are looking at a couple different components. Asset management, facility management, we often talk about hard services and soft services. Hard services is truly asset management, and that is probably the most important element of buildings. But there are also soft services that get into the service delivery, service level agreements and contracts, and the delivery of other services like security and custodial, grounds, lots of other elements that provide services not directly related to assets. But again, I think the key is that facility management, the biggest component is asset management. From a facilities perspective, you think about the added element of sustainability in the environment. When we think about 40% of our raw materials go into buildings, that buildings utilize 30% of the power generated in the US and account for about 70% of the electricity generated, and produce about 36% of the CO2 emissions overall in the US. These are big critical issues that we have to wrestle with when it comes to managing assets in facilities, which leads to the resilience side, which is now we talk about climate change and rising sea levels and extreme weather events, but also violence in the workplace and terrorism and active shooters. The security and safety issues and resilience now are things that we deal with day-to-day in facilities in terms of operating facilities. There's also a fairly new ISO management system standard 22301 around societal security, business continuity management system that is integrated as part of this. And finally, if we look at another one of our big challenges in buildings these days is excess space. There are several recent reports from the GAO around federal facilities. Federal government owns well over 500,000 buildings. Recent reports have said that there's over 14,000 buildings in the federal government real property inventory that are excess or underutilized. The Air Force and I believe it's Army alone, I think the Air Force reported 30% of their buildings, and the Army 21% of their buildings exceed what they can actually use and take care of. Meanwhile, we're still operating, still maintaining, still investing, still paying taxpayer dollars into keeping these underutilized facilities operational. So there are several challenges, again, when it comes to buildings. When we talk about facilities and look at one of the things we need to do, there are two things that I think are really important to this discussion. One is certainly the integration of ISO 55000 into facilities and facility management is part of what we do. We need that management system, we need that operational structure and framework to be better asset managers. But in addition, we need better training and education. When it comes to the operations, and I don't know how many of you here are in the building environment, but it's very decentralized. We have architects and engineers, facility managers, and people coming in from all walks of life with different backgrounds, different education, a lack of standards, a lack of coherent and consistent education and training to be able to manage those assets. So these standards are absolutely critical. When it comes to, again, facility management, I think the key that we look at is that facility management and asset management have a direct impact on the productivity of everybody that works in and around a building. And in order to do so, we really need to establish international standards that enable the discipline of asset management and facility management. And Richard, maybe one day that will be one profession. But to be developed and evolve in a coherent and consistent fashion. And the objectives of the 55,000 is just that. Now I'm going to make things a little bit muddied here for a second, but I'm going to explain this. About 4 years ago, BSI, the British Standards Institute, suggested a new work item proposal and a new technical committee, 267, around the development of both technical and management system standards for facility management. So currently we have our technical committee. There's about 40 countries represented on the technical committee. I convene what we call Work Group 3, which is the management system standard, which is designed to be an integrated standard. And what that means is, again, we're not trying to develop duplicate or redundant standards. We recognize 55,000, that standard is there, that it's a great foundation, it's broad, and what we want to do is be able to, how can we take that and apply it to specifically to facilities, as well as encompass those other softer areas, the service level agreements, the contracting, all of the other aspects of facilities. So we are now currently in the development of ISO 41000, which is the management system standard for facility management. And again, to be hopefully integrated not only with 55,000, but some others as well. Our goal, again, is for organizations to be able to demonstrate that they do have robust processes in which to not only design, but manage and improve integrated facility management, including asset management. Again, we need to be able to provide safe, secure, healthy, productive facilities, as well as improve and enhance the quality of services that are delivered to help organizations achieve their mission. So the last thing I want to touch on just before we, and then kind of open it up for panel and questions, is I think, again, one of the most important things that we have to deal with, and I heard a lot of it today, and what you've also seen is some forward thinkers. And what the reality out there, probably 20 years ago, when I started working in the technology realm and looking at data around facilities and assets, it was hard to find. There wasn't a lot of data. There were some systems like Maximo that were out there that were starting to be implemented. Today, it's a lot different. Today, my perception, my belief is that we have an overwhelming amount of information and data. A lot of that information and data is not consistent. It's not accurate. It's not of good quality. It's in disparate systems. It's hard to get your arms around. You hear a lot of discussion around data analytics. In fact, I truly believe data analytics will go away when we get our arms around all of that information and it becomes cognitive computing. But again, what we have is today in the realm of facility in the vertical market of buildings when it comes to asset management, it's easy to think of, and I love the vision of BIM, of building information models. When we design and construct facilities, the vision of BIM is actually to collect data once at the point of creation and use it throughout the life cycle of facilities. Well, it's, again, from the design, we see a lot of it in terms of design. We're now designers, and I know we've got some Microdesk folks here that sell Revit and understand BIM very well, that you have good building information models. And in fact, I think contractors are actually driving it more with their need to understand and see the benefit of doing clash detection in buildings, looking at virtual models to get into complex areas, save millions of dollars in expediting construction, taking care of inconsistencies in virtual models before we get out into the field and do the construction. Then moving into operations. And while we do have information exchanges and new models and new concepts or protocols like COBE, construction operations, building information exchange, The difficulty is it's not a one-for-one information exchange from a BIM into Maximo. We've got now being utilized in most facilities organizations. If you look at universities or government agencies, there's a whole spectrum of information systems that are being utilized, from GIS systems looking at infrastructure and utilities and master planning, to emergency response, to integrated workplace management systems looking really at the space and move management aspects and real estate, to truly the CMMS like Maximo and others that are dealing with operations and maintenance. But we also have building automation systems and energy management systems and capital planning systems, as well as project management systems. Again, data going into and residing multiple different disparate applications. ISO 55000 and ISO 41000 are there to provide that high-level framework, a management system standard that will give us that systematic approach to design and take care of a lot of these incongruities and consistencies to create better processes and be able to manage that information and data better. I think the key result is going to be giving us information about buildings that is more accurate, more consistent, more reliable to help us justify the needs that we have from both an infrastructure standpoint as well as buildings. Help us prioritize the needs from a capital renewal standpoint and enable us to be better stewards of the built environment and deliver better services that help enable the mission, as Scott said, the why of why we come to work and do what we do. But how do we consistently and accurately measure that to benchmark not only across market segments, but even within our own institutions? The goal in the future state, when we get more intelligent buildings, smarter buildings, using and integrating technologies, better data standards and governance, improved workflow processes to help us be good stewards, have that accurate, consistent, and reliable data to make better decisions about our facilities that, again, are going to help us improve our ability to prioritize and justify the needs to get more, closing those gaps of funding to take care of those both infrastructure and building issues, and minimize our total cost of ownership, as well as create high-performance buildings and high-performance organizations. So with that, I'm going to leave with just a number of, again, the desired outcomes of where we want to be when we do implement 55,000, and eventually, probably 2 or 3 years down the road, hopefully when the FM 41,000 standard gets published and integrated in, that we will be able to start to achieve some of these goals.